Hello and welcome to the Wildcast podcast. This is Michael Lev, senior writer and columnist for the Arizona Daily Star. I am joined today by Bruce Pascoe, our men's basketball reporter. In case you're living under a rock, Arizona men's basketball is the number one team in the nation. They are 21-0 heading into Saturday's game at Arizona State. And there is significance to that record in particular, as Bruce described and explained in a story that is appearing on the Arizona Daily Star's website, Tucson.com. It's what we call alt-prez, right, Bruce? Alternative presentation. Bruce basically broke down a bunch of different categories. Bruce, tell us, as you were doing the research for that story and thinking back toward that 2013-14 team that also started 21-0, what did you learn when you compared those two squads?
Well, that's kind of why I did it, because I kind of wanted to learn and remember for myself. So, and we call it alternative presentation. A lot of numbers, so I had to make sure it wasn't like going to put people to sleep or whatever, and try and make it somewhat interesting. But no, I learned that basically these teams are more alike than you might think, especially when you think of Sean Miller and that grinded out defense teams, and then you think Tommy Lloyd free flowing. And granted, the tempos are very different, but there's a lot of similarities. At least I thought, as far as they both have 7-footers, they both had veteran point guards leading the team, and they both both had kind of a versatility, especially in the front court. I thought Brandon Ashley, and he got hurt in game 22, as many U of A fans painfully remember, I'm sure. But he gave him a versatility where he could play 4 and he could play a really athletic 5 when Caleb Tarczewski was out on that team. And this year you have Tobe Awaka, a different player than Ashley, certainly, but still gives him a different look, I think, when he plays center versus Krivas. So there's that similar. And then the other thing that really jumped out at me is neither team really shot a lot of threes as relative to the amount of shots they took. And I thought that was interesting because both teams can really pound it in. Both teams have drivers who can get to the basket and didn't need to rely on threes a lot.
Yeah, as I was looking through it this morning, there were a few stats that jumped out to me. One was the adjusted tempo stat, and I think you used Ken Palm for that. That team, the 2013-14 team, ranked 272nd nationally in adjusted tempo, whereas this team is 26th. So clearly a difference in offensive style, pace. 2-point percentage I thought was interesting. That team back then was 50.7%. This team is 57.4% on 2-point shots, which is a crazy stat. Even some of the guards have like super high percentages inside the arc. And then the other one was free throw percentage. That team was 65.9%, and this team is 73.8%. And I'm guessing a lot of that had to do with Aaron Gordon just not being a good free throw shooter, kind of his Achilles heel when he was a college player.
Yeah, that I had forgotten about that. He was really, really, that was tough. And that was, I think he got to the basket the second most on that team. So he had a lot of opportunity, and I think he shot 42%. And that was a thing. He's obviously gotten better, and he was a freshman then. But that jumped out. This team is more in the sort of average, slightly above average kind of ballpark as far as that goes.
So as you mentioned, Brandon Ashley got injured in game number 22. That's when the streak ended, and it kind of changed the trajectory of the season. Now, that team still went really far, right, and took Wisconsin to overtime in the Elite Eight. I mean, they were that close to still going to the Final Four, even without one of their core rotational players. They lost games by 2, 3, 7, 4, and 1 point that season. One of those losses in double overtime, another one in overtime. Looking back on it, it's of course, it's an alternate presentation, an alternate history. But if Brandon Ashley doesn't get hurt, what do you think happens? that year.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, they did go as far. In fact, I think you could say granted, overtime game, they maybe won it. They could have won it, but you just figure without him, those steps along the way, just something was going to happen. And so I think if he's in the lineup, certainly they beat Cal. They lost that game by 2. That was his hometown. I mean, who knows? He got hurt 2 minutes into the game. He hadn't even contributed at that point. They lost a double to overtime game at ASU. Theoretically would have won that. And then they lost at Oregon the last game of the regular season, and that probably would have been a loss either way. And then UCLA in the conference tournament. So they lost to. That probably didn't matter. They got a number 1, but I think certainly if they won those other 2 regular season games, Cal and ASU, they may have been number 1 overall. And if you really want to get into the weeds, you can look at it and say, well, if they're number 1 overall, and I did actually, if you look at the S curve from that year, they wouldn't have played Wisconsin. They wouldn't have matched up with Wisconsin. They would have had the weakest number 2 seed. And I forget who it was, but it wasn't Wisconsin. So you could say, hey, not only would they have had Ashley to help beat Wisconsin in overtime, but they probably wouldn't have played Wisconsin in the first place, which wasn't a good matchup for Miller's team that year. Obviously it was so yeah, and maybe they could have, and then they get to the Final Four. It's, you never know. That team was, with him in the lineup, they were, they had a pretty good chance at it, and they certainly could have been I think certainly would have been a Final Four team with him. And then whether they won it all, I don't know, but the fact is that particular injury is probably the number 1 reason why Arizona has gone 25 years without a Final Four appearance. I mean, it's crazy, but it's true.
So that team featured Aaron Gordon, as we mentioned, Brandon Ashley came off the bench, Nick Johnson, Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, T.J. McConnell, Gabe York, Caleb Tarczewski. Those were the main rotational players.
Yeah, actually,
go ahead.
Ashley came off. Ashley started usually at the 4, and Hollis Jefferson usually came off the bench, and that was what is interesting too, because he was a big time.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, you're right. I'm reading that wrong here.
Yeah,
Ashley started, and Rondé Hollis Jefferson came off the bench. My bad.
Yeah, and really, 5-star player. Everybody knew he was an NBA guy. There was a lot of thought he might be one and done, and he came off the bench and kind of sacrificed a little bit that way, and really gave him, super athletic guy, gave him really a tough look, especially defensively when he came off the bench. So that was another weapon that team had.
So another hypothetical for you, Brandon Ashley is healthy. We're able to create a simulation where this year's team faces the 2013-14 team, and let's say a best of 7. Who you got?
I would say this year's team probably in, I don't know, 6 maybe. Yeah, I think.
How come?
I think they're just a little more balanced, and I think the chemistry is a little better. There's just there's some intangibles about this team, and I think as the stats show, they're just a little more efficient inside. I think those bigs. Tobe Waka is the best offensive rebounder in the country right now, and Krivas is obviously way up there as well. That team in 2014 had Caleb Tarczewski up front, and granted, like I said, Ashley brought a lot to them, but he was a different kind of player. So I just think this team's a little more dominant, both offensively and defensively inside. And then I think the rest of the characteristics are remarkably similar. So yeah, I would give them a little bit of an edge this year.
Here's your chance to make friends and influence people. What do you think about the coaching matchup between Tommy Lloyd and Sean Miller in this simulation?
Well, they're just different. I mean, Miller went out on kind of tough terms, and but the fact is he's a really good defensive coach. He's maybe arguably a little more transactional in the way he works with players than Tommy Lloyd, who's sort of more of a I love you but kind of guy, and Miller's like, you're going to do this and I'm going to do this for you, so they were different that way. But Miller's defenses were tough to mess around. I will say this too about Miller's teams. Generally, they never lost, they didn't look over anybody. They were always ready. They would lose most of the time when they were expected to lose. They were very predictable that way. And Lloyd's too, but they're just they're very different coaches, especially offensively. It's hard to really describe there, but I think probably one thing that maybe jumps out a little bit is just offensive efficiency was, well, and again, that's mostly ran mostly inside, and then but I think overall Miller ran a lot more set offenses there. That stat where assists to the field goals that are set up by assists was actually better in 2013-14. I think that reflects how Miller's teams really did have a lot of sets, and they were structured and this and that, and Arizona's a little more free flowing, play off the screens, get what they can get, and then this team in particular has a lot of guys who, Tobey Waka gets his own offensive rebound, puts it back, and then you've got guys who just, Braden Burries just takes it in there, off the beginning of the play or whatever, and you don't have an assist on those kind of plays. So anyway, they're just a little bit different, but yeah, I mean, obviously, I think they're both really good coaches.
For sure. You are back in town. You went up to Provo on Monday night for the showdown against BYU, and it turned out to be a thriller. At the end of the day, it was not a close game for most of it until the last 90 seconds or so. And unfortunately, this is just kind of what we do. We focus a lot on that last 90 seconds versus the first, 38 minutes. Yeah. So when you look back on that final minute plus, and you're kind of creating, let's say, a blame pie for what happened, what percentage do you put on the officiating, which I feel like the fans are kind of 90% officiating, 10% Arizona's lack of execution and composure, and then what percent do you put on the latter, where this is kind of self-induced, self-inflicted wounds, etc., that enabled the Cougars to come back in that game?
Yeah, I think that's most of it. It was self-inflicted. Jaden Bradley had a turnover and an offensive offensive foul turnover. This is in the last minute. There was another foul, I believe, and just but again, that happens on the road. That actually reminded me a little bit of the way, well, they weren't ahead and they lost, but at Kansas State last year they had this meltdown late in the game, and that happens sometimes in these true road environments, and the pressure ratchets it up. It was sold out environment. It's high elevation. All these things are very much, understandable. What was surprising, frankly, was that they took the lead they did. And that early, this is a pretty good BYU team. And the way they kind of made AJ Dabansa work really hard for his, whatever it was, 24 points or whatever. And Richie Saunders had a rough night as well. And he's been kind of a guy who's hurt this team a lot. So a little bit of that, and then the officiating. I mean, I don't know. To me, it was kind of a wash. They had one tough call, but there was that block from Burries. There was there's a couple of kind of no calls that maybe helped them a little bit as well. And I always think in officiating, it's they look at, if you can hit 85% of your calls and no calls right, that's a really good game. So, so if you look at the calls and no calls, there are probably a dozen of them in the last minute. So, maybe 3 of them went the wrong way, but that's the way it goes. They're humans.
Yeah. So they called Braden Burries for fouling Dabansa on that 3-point attempt, and it sure looked like Dabansa stuck his leg out to the side. That was an awkward play, because Braden clearly tried to go around him, but he dipped his shoulder, and it almost looked like he was knocking into him on purpose. Right. I could see why the official right there on that side, because he had the same angle as on TV, would have thought that was a foul. But there was also, they got a break on Koa. Pete went up for a jumper right around the free throw line, and I think it was Richie Saunders who was on him. He jumped straight up and down, didn't touch him, but they got the call there. I didn't think watching it that oh my God, they're getting screwed by the officials, but we don't look at the game the same way that fans do, and I understand. And there's also a history, not only in this series, but with one of the officials Tony Padilla. So I understand where they're coming from and why a lot of fans thought that way. But as I was watching it, I was like, this is mostly self-induced, right? Like you can say what you want about, whether there should have been a jump ball or a foul called, but you're inbounding the ball on the sideline and you're pretty much inbounding right into a trap, right? Like, I don't think they execute those plays very well, even though they say they work on them all the time. I think that's just an area where they could stand to improve. And sometimes when you go through something like this, it becomes a point of emphasis and you do end up improving on it.
Right. And guys are more motivated to get better at it. I think that's the bottom line, Michael. I think that they have practiced a lot of this stuff, but when have they ever needed it this year? It's so much different. It's so much different doing these plays in crunch time when it's actually happening and you've got 18,000 people who don't like you and you're tired because it's been a long, stressful game at a high elevation. It's really hard to execute those things well. So maybe they get better at it. Certainly, I think they need to. They probably, win or lose, they needed this kind of game because they need a few more of them, and they'll probably get some next month. But you get in the tournament, even if they get a number one seed, that means they've got 5 games that still could be difficult, at least 4, and so they need to work on that stuff. And I think to that point about the officiating there, I think Lloyd went off on, he was a little bit upset about that, but he said, he talked about, one of the no calls and how, basically he was happy there because he said last year we had the same situation when this was referring to Richie Saunders at home, when Saunders, that kind of arguably call against Trey Townsend, who was just kind of standing there. And this time was it Rob Wright drove in, Jaden Burry's just handcuffing him the whole way. And then
Jaden Bradley.
Or Bradley, excuse me. And so that they, no call was made there. So, you could have arguably made it there. So it kind of seemed like a little bit of a wash. And the other thing is, from our perspective too, I mean, at these road games, typically I'm in the corner or way up high. That game I was way up high. A lot of times during the game, if there's a flagrant or some kind of controversial foul call or whatever, I'll get on my phone and watch the replay on ESPN or whatever on my phone while I'm sitting there. But if it's the last minute, I'm writing for our buzzer. I'm watching the replay on the scoreboard, but I don't have time to fully dissect what's happening. You guys, the fans, can see a lot of those replays better than I can sometimes. Afterwards, I will. But anyway, my point is, you're writing so quickly on that. See it a little bit, maybe, and then ask Tommy Lloyd or whoever about it afterwards, and then write something, boom, put it online. And then later, in fact, I literally was in the parking lot in Provo after I left. Before I wrote my follow-up story, I was writing, watching that last minute again to see exactly what happened. And, sitting there in the parking lot of a fast food restaurant that was the only thing open at that point, watching that and say, did I get that right? Did Bradley do this? What happened? Because there was a lot. So it's just, it's not the process. And, when it happens like that,
there was a lot of like do's and don'ts in that last minute. Like, do make your free throws, and maybe you'll have a little bit more of a cushion. And they missed a couple free throws, and then it was like, don't commit a flagrant foul in the last minute, giving the other team free throws in possession. Don't put yourself in a position where they can call you for knocking into a three-point shooter, right? Just like, be a little bit smarter in those situations. Don't give the officials the opportunity to make a bad call.
Yeah, I think that I'm glad you brought up flagrant. I forgot about that. And I actually asked Lloyd, do you think, he's talked a lot about.
I remember that. Yeah.
I asked him, is the emotion too much? Do you have to, with a freshman like Burry's, you have to kind of calm down so they don't foul so hard. And he said it was just a regular foul. What are you going to do? You can't, if this guy's a lottery pick, we're going to let him just dunk on us. We got to get in there and foul him. But then when you look at the replay, and I don't think Lloyd had seen this at this point, when you look at the replay, like, it looked like Burry's literally grabbed his arm and pushed him down. And that's one of the things I watched in the parking lot that night. But that's something that, maybe a more experienced player with a little more cool would foul him a little differently than that. But I think he probably erred on the hard side because it's AJ Dabanza, and if you don't make sure you take him out, he's going to score. So that's probably what happened there. And I'm guessing that Lloyd maybe didn't see the angle that the replay showed as far as the way Burris hit him, but it definitely looked like a legitimate flagrant. Especially, people need to keep in mind too that this year in particular, they are really, really serious about anything shoulder and above as far as flagrants. If you mess with that area, it's an automatic, and sometimes even a flagrant too, if it's deemed that it was really kind of not beyond excessive, like just downright nasty.
So the next game is Saturday up at ASU. And
speaking of flagrant fouls, yeah.
The Sun Devils are
technicals, I think, in that game up there last year. I just looked at that again, and that was the one where Caleb Love and BJ Freeman got both.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. Yeah.
That's okay. I would expect a heated atmosphere up there, to be sure. This is a chance for the Sun Devils to play spoiler. They're struggling this season, which definitely could be Bobby Hurley's last year as head coach. But I thought they played really well when they were down in Tucson a little bit ago. I actually attended that game as a fan. I was glad as a spectator that it was a close game because it was more entertaining that way than if it had been a blowout. I was looking through some of the advanced stats from that game. That was Arizona State's third lowest turnover percentage in a game this season. But on the other hand, it was also their lowest free throw attempt percentage. So they weren't getting to the line very much. And they also allowed the fourth highest offensive rebound percentage by an opponent, which of course is not atypical at all when you are facing Arizona. Right. I bet you Bobby Hurley would love it if his team played that well against everybody else. Seemed like they really got up for that game and they were locked in. Took care of the ball, didn't let Arizona get out and run. Eventually, the Wildcats were able to kind of get things going inside, especially in the second half of that game. I think they shot, 67% or something in the second half of that. But do you expect kind of, ASU's best shot in this game, and that'll be another close one like the one we saw down in Tucson?
Yeah, I would think so, but there is a chance at this point, and I don't see it, but there is a chance at some point that ASU is just kind of going to throw in the towel a little bit because they lost another close one at UCF. So I got to think they're super frustrated that they're coming so close and can't pull it off. I mean, the game they gave Arizona their toughest home game of the season so far. It was really something. And you're right. Hurley's, got to be frustrated. I think he said something after that game. If you could just bottle up the way we played, we would have won, blah, 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 all these other games. And yeah, he's in the last year of his contract. He's thinking, hey, if we won this game, maybe it would have rolled into something and maybe things would get better because he's in the last year of his contract. He's, it looks like their NIL is down and they're not able to get the talent they were able to get before. It's a spiraling difficult situation, yet they're still playing really hard. And yeah, like you said, they beat, gave Arizona their biggest scare here, beat Cincinnati, got blown up by Houston, but that's not a surprise there. And then them playing UCF pretty tough in Orlando, that's something else too. So I think they seem like they're still playing hard and confident. So I would think that they'll give them their best and especially up there in Tempe. It's I kind of almost look at it like it's, their last stand or Bobby Hurley's last stand. I mean, if they're gonna, if he's gonna save his job and make something out of the season, it needs to start with the win on Saturday, probably for them.
There were parallels between the ASU UCF game and the Arizona BYU game, in that the Sun Devils were up by 12 with 6:09 to play. The difference, of course, is that they did not hang on to win the game. They allowed UCF to come back, rally, and defeat them, which I'm sure was pretty demoralizing for them. Is there any aspect of ASU's game its roster, its personnel, its style, or anything that you feel like is particularly troublesome for Arizona?
I think that they've got they've got a couple really good guards. They're basically but Arizona does too, so they kind of offset that a little bit. I think I think that Masamba Diop, their big guy at the center, I think he's been a real revelation, surprise as a freshman, 7-footer. He's a little different center than Krivas, a little more long, athletic, skinnier, this and that. So I think I'm trying to remember what he had in that game.
He had a good game. They were executing the little pick and pop action pretty well. He was scoring from the mid range.
16.
But eventually, what happens?
A little bit different matchup for them, I think.
Yeah. What happens with them and with anybody is that Arizona just has so much size.
Yeah.
Right. And they're so strong. It just feels like they wear people down over the course of a game. I think Fran Fraschilla said this during the broadcast, which obviously you weren't listening to, but he said that Tommy told him that Arizona's style is kind of like a football team that runs the ball, and like eventually they just keep running and the defense gets worn down. And I kind of like that analogy. I think I compared them to the Stanford football teams under Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah.
Where they're like playing multiple tight ends and just kind of going against the flow of college basketball. Or college football in that case, college basketball in this case. We've talked about the lack of 3-point attempts. They're very low, like one of the lowest in the country in 3-point percentage. I wrote this piece a couple weeks ago now, wondering, is this a problem? Like, is this an Achilles heel? Yeah. Is this something that could undermine them? Of course, the next game they go out and knock down a bunch of threes. I think my take kind of after the column on that topic of 3-point shooting is they don't need it, right? They can still win and score and beat just about anybody without it. But if they're actually hitting threes, they're the best team in the country, and it's not even close. Like, it's sort of like the X factor in a way. And in a positive way, right? If they're actually knocking down threes, it's like you're in trouble if you're playing Arizona that day.
Yeah. Yeah, but the key is, at least to date, they've been able to withstand some bad shooting nights from three or nights when they're not taking many. I think, Florida, what did they take? 4 or something?
That was like 2 out of 5 or something. Yeah. Like that, yeah.
And that, so that is fascinating. But, it's funny because you talk about all the efficiency of threes and how that's changed the game or whatever. But if you can just shoot 70% around the basket, and even your mid-range shots, or you're hitting at 50s probably or something. I'm not sure what the advanced charts on that are, but they've got a couple guys that are pretty darn good at hitting 10 to 15 footers. And even though those only 2, if you hit them at a high enough percentage, there you go. So that's what they're.
Yeah. And the other thing about this team that we don't talk about, I don't think nearly enough, is they're a really good defensive team. And they have big guys who can switch onto smaller players and stay in front of them. I think Koa Pete is really good at that. And to me, if I'm an NBA scout, that's it's always something that I'm looking at with big people. Mm-hmm. That he's just a natural athlete with instincts who can guard. You've got Ivan Karchenkov, who is another player who can switch onto smaller players or even play bigger players. Dwayne Aristode, when he's in there, is similar. So yeah, I think this is a really good defensive team. And Jaden Bradley too. He just hunts the ball. Like, how many times this year have you seen him just kind of like pick his spot where he just goes in and he just takes the ball away from somebody?
Yeah, right. And this is a team that doesn't gamble a lot necessarily, but Bradley's got, he's got some instincts. He's a veteran guy. And yeah, if he sees an opportunity like that, he's going for it. I think his steal percentage is 3.5 right now when he's on the floor. Is that good?
Is that a good percentage?
Yeah, that is pretty good. He's ranking 125th nationally in that. Yeah. So, and that's, percentage more pace dependent, but yeah, he's pretty active on that end. So you've got that, right. And then you've got the bigs, the way they can defend the basket inside. And I think Karchenkov, to your point, he's really versatile. He reminds me of Pelle Larson a little bit, the way he can guard a anywhere from a 1 to 4 basically, and he has been, and that's something I didn't quite know or expect about him, but you're seeing that. And then Aristode certainly has a 3-and-D. He has 3-and-D NBA potential. We just haven't seen a whole lot of him, and it'll be interesting to see if he sticks around, what he becomes in the next year.
Yeah, and the other factor I think on the defensive end is Mo Krivas being a presence in the paint, whether he's at blocking shots or just altering shots. Which
he's not
a
right.
ton of. Yeah.
Right. He's not a huge shot blocking guy for his size. You might think that he's still, I mean, he is, don't get me wrong, but I think he's probably, just because of who he is and the threat, you don't want to, you want to think twice if you're driving to the basket with him in there. That's what it is. And so, it might only be, it's not just shots blocked, but it's shots altered. And it may just be shots that were never taken in the first place because the driver thought, no, I'm not going there. I'm going to do this instead.
It always amuses me when Mo comes into the interview room and he has to duck to get through the door. There are some guys who are listed at 7 feet who aren't really 7 feet, but he is legit 7'2" with length, and that's evident when you watch him play. They haven't lost yet. They could lose at ASU. I don't think so, but they will lose at some point here down the stretch. Their schedule over the last month or so is just absolutely bonkers. It's incredibly difficult. And there's a couple ways to think about that. One is that, hey, this will get them ready for the tournament, right? They're going to be in that mode, that mindset. Couldn't be a better way to end the season. The flip side is, man, what a gauntlet they have to go through, night after night after night. And then you've got the Big 12 tournament, and then you go right into the NCAA tournament. Is it going to be too much? Is it going to wear them out, wear them down? What's your, which side do you fall on when it comes to those final 5 weeks or so of the regular season?
It's interesting because last year it was also backloaded, and granted that team was struggling a lot at the beginning of the year and was just kind of figuring it out when they hit that stretch. And then they for the most part did about what was expected, and actually maybe even did a little better. And they got to the final of the Big 12 tournament, and then they made it to the Sweet 16, and which is frankly what you probably would have expected at the beginning of the year. So so they survived it. So I guess going by that, I would say they will, because this team is better equipped to do it than that, barring any injuries, of course. But if this team stays intact, I think they will survive it. I would say it errs on the side of toughening them up, because last year, again, I wondered about that. They had a lot of back-ended. They went, I think the last 3 weeks of this season was Saturday. They had Saturday at Iowa State, and then the next Saturday was at Kansas, and then the Saturday after that was the Big 12 tournament. And they lost at Iowa State and Kansas, but did pretty well in the Big 12 tournament, and got a seed that probably was they would have gladly taken, certainly at the beginning of the Big 12 season. So yeah, I don't know. I think deep down, I would think they probably would prefer to spread this out a little bit more, but it will get them ready. It's just a matter of, again, does it wear them out? And, but this is a team that's shown some resilience that way.
Because this is the second Big 12 season, we have a neat little comparison that we can make between, year one and year two. So we'll be able to look, when the stretch is over, at how they fared this year compared to last year. They actually lost 5 of their last 8 regular season games a year ago. Losing at Kansas State was probably the one that you didn't expect, but then they lost it at home to Houston. They lost at home to BYU. We mentioned that earlier, controversial call at the end. They got kind of blown out at Iowa State, and then they lost at Kansas. And there were victories at Baylor versus Utah and versus ASU in between. But yeah, it sets up similarly to how it was a year ago, and we'll be able to, like I said, just kind of examine how they do over that stretch. I was talking to somebody, I won't say who it was, about the idea of, if they're in a great spot at the end of the regular season, would it be beneficial for them to maybe go out early in the Big 12 tournament? If they don't need to win it to still have a number one seed. They would never take that mentality into a game, right? Like never, ever. That is not how Tommy Lloyd looks at the world. That's not how any of these players do. But sometimes you wonder, like you see this in other sports like baseball. Sometimes like it's kind of better to lose early in your conference tournament, not have to use your pitchers, save them for the NCAA tournament. Do you think there's any merit to that whatsoever, or is that just a bunch of nonsense?
I absolutely think there's some merit to it, but you're right. They don't look at it that way. And their competitors deep down, I just don't think they can do it. But I think the biggest example of that was 22-23. They won the Pac-12 tournament, real physical game. UCLA in the final. Ballo had broken his hand, wasn't telling any, or he was telling people, but U of A wasn't. And Kirk Risa was, I think he had a shoulder. He was banged up again. And then they hobble into the NCAA tournament and lose to Princeton. So what would have happened if they lost, if they lost in the semifinal, they had an extra day to rest up, that would have made a difference. But I think if they're at full strength, they'll probably be okay. And, with charter flights and buys in the tournament, it wouldn't be so bad. I mean, if they get to the Big 12 tournament, the finals on Saturday night, they fly home, they get home at 2 a.m. in the morning on Sunday. They don't have to leave for Kansas City again until I think probably Tuesday night. They wouldn't even open until Thursday. So, they would survive that okay. But I do think there's some merit into that. And that's kind of been an age-old argument, like, going out early. And I think what it is they want to win. But I think if you're the coaches and you lose on that Friday, you're probably okay with it deep down. You're just not going to maybe admit that.
Sure. And when they go to the NCAA tournament, assuming things stay on the same course that they're on, they're very likely to be playing in San Diego, right? In the first round, which I think is a Thursday, Saturday. But that is about as close of a location as you could have, unless the games were in Phoenix, So very, very easy to get to. Not a lot of wear and tear for the San Diego trip.
Yeah, and a lot of U of A fans, easy access from here, Phoenix or Southern Cal, and we all know there's a ton of U of A alums in Southern Cal. When they played in San Diego a few years ago, they drew really well. In fact, I think Lloyd was disappointed it wasn't even more crazy because that first game, the first game there, they had problems they didn't get the arena cleared out in time, and fans couldn't enter until late. It was a big cluster, and they really struggled early in that first game that year. But anyway, but yeah, no, good support, a good place to be. They'll almost certainly be there unless they really, really flame out here, just because they'll need a Western-based 1-4 team to anchor one of the pods there, and whereas and the other side is Portland, so Gonzaga probably would go there as a 1-4. So
yeah, 2013-14 team started the NCAA tournament in San Diego, by the way. Just saying.
Yeah, they did.
A little coincidence.
I think they played San Diego State later too, right? Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, and in fact that when they went there in what was it 22, I think that was Lloyd's first team, and then they lost. They just got blown out by Houston in the Sweet 16, but or as a number one seed, which probably was a little bit of an underachievement there if you look at it that way, but Houston was probably underseeded and basically playing in their backyard there in San Antonio.
I want to hit on a couple more individual players before we answer a few mailbag questions to conclude the show. Braden Burries, he just keeps getting better to me. Like I'm just almost sitting there astonished at how good he has looked of late. He's just so much more confident, sure of himself. He can score in all kinds of different ways. He can make threes. He can drive. He can pull up. But he's not like a selfish player either. And he's still distributing the ball. He made that block at the end of the game to save the day against BYU. Like I am just thoroughly impressed with what I've seen from him since that kind of slow start that he had to his freshman season.
Yeah, I remember getting a couple of comments, texts and emails about, is he underachieving, or was he a bust? Is he, people have no patience. I mean, and I tried to say this before, but he was the one guy of all these highly rated freshmen that really didn't have a lot of high level experience. He was the California Player of the Year. this and that, scored a boatload of points in the final or whatever, but it just took him a while to adjust and to keep his confidence. And because you had Cole Pete, played 4 years for USA Basketball. Ivan Chekhov was playing with 32-year-old German pros, and just a different deal. Even Aristode had played for the Netherlands senior team. Burries, because of his age, wasn't able to qualify even for some of those USA teams because he was too old. So it's kind of been a weird thing. And so it just took him some time to get used to this high level stuff. And you're right. I think his confidence has grown. And you saw his competitiveness. I think even the Red Blue game when he went crazy in the second half of that, just to give his team the win. And then I think it was a matter of adjusting to the competition and the level of things. And then I think, gotten a little smarter too about, from the experience too, as well as confidence. And he's kind of putting it all together. And you're right, it's happened very fast. Although they do say it has been a kind of a cliche that, by February or so, usually your freshmen are kind of sophomores when they're playing that many minutes. And that's certainly the case with him.
His backcourt mate, Jaden Bradley, we both wrote about this this week, but his splits between games at McHale and away from McHale are they're remarkably different. Like he is a different player at home versus the road. I'll read these off real quick. 12 games at home, he's averaging 10.3 points per game, shooting 44.4%, takes 7.5 field goal attempts per game. 5 away games, 21 points per game, almost double, more than double, actually. Putting my Northwestern education to good use there, Bruce.
Right.
I used to be good at math at some point. 21 points per game, more than double, 58.3% from the field, 12 field goal attempts per game. And then the 4 neutral site games, 16.5 points per game, 51.2%, 10.2 field goal attempts per game. I theorize that he sort of feels the moment and understands that, hey, this is a tough environment. I need to kind of be a little bit more assertive in these situations.
Yeah.
Be more aggressive, set the tone. Whereas, everyone's a little more comfortable at home. It's not, you're not facing a hostile environment. They've also had some, lesser opponents at home, some blowout situations. But I thought that was super interesting that he just takes his game to another level and is way more aggressive offensively when they're not at McHale.
Right. And he doesn't, right. And he doesn't, doesn't have that sense of urgency necessarily, or whatever you want to call it, for some of the home games, but also doesn't also see the need of like, okay, this is, whatever mid-major opponent, I'm going to get 30 tonight and boost my scoring up. He does not do that at all. He's very mature about that. I think the mature players and people around them tend to know, hey, the scouts are going to see through that stuff anyway. If that's where you're trying to be efficient and lead this team, and that's what he's doing. And he has helped himself, by pulling out, like you said, when he senses the moment. I think we saw that early, UConn, UCLA, the way he went to the basket in crunch time, hitting free throws in crunch time, did it 2 years in a row at BYU. He had 8, I think, up there last year, and then 4 in the last couple minutes this time. So, he's got that. And then, I think it's interesting with him because he's 2 years in a row, he's declared for the draft and come back. Now he's actually turned himself into a legitimate draft prospect. I mean, I was talking to one scout earlier this year about, he's actually kind of on their radar now. They're impressed. So it's really interesting the way he's done it, and kind of a little bit of an unconventional way there. You're right, where it's just in the moments, but not all, doesn't seem, is okay sitting in the background and doing his thing as a setting up guys, or and playing some defense when in the other types.
Yeah, the aforementioned Fran Fraschilla, who does most of the highest profile Big 12 games for ESPN, he was very insistent during that broadcast that Jaden Bradley is an NBA player now, and doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be drafted in the first round. Doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be drafted at all. We've seen with the case of Caleb Love that He was not drafted, and he's had a really good rookie season for the Portland Trailblazers. I don't think Pelle Larsson wasn't drafted.
No, he was in the second round, though.
Was he a second rounder? Okay. All right. Second rounder. And he's had a lot of really good moments for the Miami Heat. It always impresses me how many NBA players Arizona is able to produce when they show those videos. During the second half with Michael Lev NBA highlights. It's like so many guys. Holy cow.
Yeah.
Really, really impressive. I saw someone compare Jaden to Rajon Rondo, and that was definitely a having more to do with like style of play than maybe like off-court demeanor or character, because Rondo's a little crazy and Jaden Bradley seems like one of the most like kind of chill dudes you'll encounter. But I thought that was interesting because a little bit longer guy, good defensive player, unselfish, looks to distribute, a little old school the way he finishes around the basket. But I don't know, it's hard to knock anything that Jaden has done this season. He's really been exceptional. Now, there's one guy who has been struggling, who's part of the rotation, and that's Anthony Del Orso.
Mm-hmm.
And he has scored 0 or 2 points in 4 of the last 5 games. 0 for 3 against ASU, 0 for 6 against UCF, 0 for 5 against Cincinnati, 0 for 3 against BYU. He did like sort of have a little mini breakout in the West Virginia game. Maybe some of that was kind of in, junk time down the stretch. When you look at the offensive contributions, especially of the 8-man rotation, it's really more of a 6-man rotation, right? Like it's the core 6 guys, the starting 5 plus Tobias Walker are the ones who do most of the damage. And Dwayne Aristote and Anthony Del Orso, I think, are clearly the 7th and 8th. Dwayne can give you some defense, some switching, maybe knock down a 3 here and there. Do you feel like they need a better version of Anthony Del Orso? Like, do you believe what Tommy said a couple games ago, that like he believes in him and that at some point in some big moment that ADO is going to step up? Or do you think he's just in a funk that he might not be able to get out of?
Yeah, I think I think Lloyd kind of has to say that because he's got a track record of kind of rising up. I mean, I think probably the biggest example was the way he played against Oregon in the second round last year, hitting a couple threes and then also some really key free throws at the end, and just that composure he showed in that. And so I think he's just in a funk right now, and I think Lloyd is basically saying, yeah, he's going to get back to that. We know what he can do. He will do that. And I think he also he has to say that because, and I don't, not that he doesn't mean it. I think he does, but I think he has to say that because you've got to keep, especially with shooters, you got to keep them confident. They go through funks, and you got to keep. That's why you always see these guys, if somebody struggles and then they have a good game shooting and they come to the podium and inevitably they'll say something like, well, the coaches and my teammates just told me to keep shooting. Well, they do, because they know it's going to come around. They just don't know when. And this has been a long funk. I think you're right. West Virginia game, I'm not sure, but he had a good game at TCU. That was the last one I can remember it being. He was really a factor, but yeah, I mean, it is. I probably, you were kicking at the tires here as far as like, what does this team have an Achilles heel? And it might be shooting if they're in a tough physical matchup inside where they're getting matched for the most part, and they need a couple of threes to break through. They've got other guys who can shoot it, but certainly it would help them if Del Orso's on. And I think they're just, they're hoping that's the case. And I think we'll see. I mean, if this goes on much longer, it would be a troubling thing. But he's had moments. He's had streaks this year, earlier this year, where he's been pretty on. So, it's usually going to revert to the mean, and I think that's what they're hoping for right now.
Yeah, I think he just needs to string a couple good games in a row to get his confidence back. Yeah. I agree with that kind of idea of just keep shooting. I would say if I were an Arizona opponent this year, I would go under screens. I would sag off. I would just be like, no matter who it is, whether it's Burries, Bradley, Del Orso, I'm like, you guys want to shoot threes? Go ahead. Like, we'll give you that, because that great comment from Jerome Tang earlier this year, like, he's talking about like you have to pick your poison against Arizona, and like everything is poison or something to that extent. I don't know if I totally agree with that because, they don't like to shoot. They don't shoot a lot of threes, as we mentioned. It's not necessarily the strength of the team. You got to try to take away something. I would just pack the paint and be like,
yeah,
hey, you guys want to shoot the threes, and if you beat us that way, that's fine. But we have to try to defend something.
Yeah, that's true. Although I think that's kind of what West Virginia tried to do. And granted, they're not as talented as a lot of teams Arizona's going to be facing, certainly in the second half of this league season. But West Virginia gave them some decent threes and tried to pack it a little, and they did. Awaka and Krivas, didn't score a whole lot in that game. I think combined for 15 or so between the two of them, and Arizona didn't have any trouble in that game. So because they were hitting threes, but it'd be interesting to see if that happens, and then you have a situation where they're getting some threes and they're just not hitting them. Maybe Delorso's off or whatever. Then that could really be problematic.
All right, we have a few mailbag questions. We always appreciate everyone's contributions on the social media platform known as X. This one comes from Tim Taylor. He says, is Sir Charles' annual coronation of UA basketball a jinx, or is he finally due? What our guy Tim is referring to there is a quote from Charles, who said, I'm watching more college basketball and I'm calling it the Arizona Invitational. I think Charles has several years said he liked Arizona going into an NCAA tournament, and then they end up flopping. Obviously, it has nothing to do with anything. What do you think about that, Bruce?
He's picked him, I think, because he played for the Suns and still has a home in the Valley. I mean, he's been a fan of Arizona for a while, and I think he's done some whole brackets and on Selection Sunday where he's picked them to at least get to the Final Four. So I don't know, but he has done things like that before. But because of the kind of player he was, I'm sure he likes this Arizona team, real physical and big and aggressive. So kind of, I would think he relates to that. But I mean, if you believe in jinxes, okay. I mean, this is a program, despite its so many strengths and Elite Eights and this and that and Pac-12 titles, and still hasn't been in the Final Four in 25 years. So I don't know whether you believe in jinxes or what, but there are theories you can take, I suppose.
All right, this one comes from Rolodex 2738. He says, in the United States of America, is it possible that there's a better ref that can fill in for Tony Padilla? What will it take to get TP removed from officiating Big 12 games? It's gotten to the point where he's the biggest show in town on game nights, which is odd, but true. Our colleague Jason Shear always tweets out who the officials are going into a game. Usually it means nothing to me. I haven't studied that. I haven't followed college basketball as closely enough to make any sort of assessment about that. I do know that there have been some calls with Tony Padilla in particular that have not gone Arizona's way. It feels like some other schools might feel the same way about him. How much stock do you put into who the officials are in a given game? Do they call things differently? Is Tony Padilla up to the task of reffing these big time Big 12 games?
Well, I mean, he's I looked him up because I got a couple different emails about him, people upset, like you said, and I looked him up again, and he's rating number 8 overall out of all the refs in the country on KenPom. And I don't know exactly how KenPom does it, but again, I know that if guys get 85 to 90% of their calls and no calls right, they're candidates to ref in the Final Four. So I think at least organizationally that they view him as a really good ref. And I think probably why he rubbed a lot of people wrong way was because that Saunders call at McHale last year, he was arguably out of position or in a tough position to make that call. And I think some people felt that he was kind of grandstanding and making a big deal of it. Granted, in this game, as we just talked about, he didn't make a call when maybe could have in that game at BYU. So that just happened. So, there's part of that. So, I don't know, that was a tough call because that game at McHale, because that was a 1-point game. Saunders went to the line and won it. If they hadn't lost that game, maybe they don't get matched up in the East. Maybe they don't get sent to the East and have to play Duke. I mean, there's all these kind of things you can go down that rabbit hole about, and come back to Tony Badilla, but I go back to the fact that it's just, there's so many calls early in the game, again, 85, 90%. So that 10 to 15% of them are going to be wrong. And, it just so happens that at the end of it, sometimes it can hurt, but I think for the most part, over time, those things even out. And, certainly you could look at the fact that Arizona has made more free throws than its opponents have even attempted. That's not necessarily that the refs are favoring them. A lot of, obviously, most of it is the way Arizona plays, but they're getting, they're getting some calls too. So I guess I just take a bigger picture. Like at the end of the day, usually that stuff evens out. These guys are human. I don't know if you ever tried to officiate. I actually tried to officiate at Northwestern and intramurals, and I was terrible. It was so hard. So I always have a respect for these guys' attention spans, and they're making these calls, boom. And, whereas if you're watching the game on TV, you can see at different angles and this and that and dissect it and say, oh, that was wrong. Well, probably the official might agree with you too, but he didn't have that luxury. He had to make that call. If it's not a reviewable call, sometimes it is. But so I just, overall, I mean, it is what it is. But if they are the ones, the one call that comes down the wire, it's something you got to talk about and dissect a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say what happens is, if it's that critical call in the last minute of the game, that those get more of a spotlight on them. Like they get magnified, and you just forget about like you said, the 85 to 90% of calls over the rest of the game that they got right. So that it's happened a couple of times now in the last two Arizona BYU games, and we'll see if Tony Padilla gets assigned any of these big Big 12 games that are coming up. I'm sure he will be in that mix. All right, we have one more, and this one comes from our friend and colleague, Justin Spears. Bruce, Justin says, in honor of the upcoming duel in the desert, who would be your all-time starting five of Wildcats from the state of Arizona? Here's mine, and this would be Justin's five. He's got Mike Bibby, Jared Bayless, Sean Elliott, Koa Pete, and Channing Frye. Did he leave anybody out in your recollection of Wildcats from the state of Arizona? There, of course, have been many, many good ones over the years.
Pete, Bayless.
He's got Pete, Frye, Elliott, Bayless, and Bibby are his starting five from within the state. Richard
Jefferson.
No, that's a good one.
You might put him over Bayless simply because Bayless was only here, 1 year, and Bayless was terrific, but he only played a freshman year, and that was one of the weird interim coaching years where that was one of the reasons I think why he left.
I feel like Justin is trying to put together like a real team, though. Like it seems like, right? Like he's got two guards. Wing, a four, and I guess Channing Frye would be your five. But I would say if you're going regardless of position, you'd probably have to put Richard Jefferson in there, right?
Yeah, I mean, and you could say you still got Bibby, your point guard. Bayless is a point guard too, but I mean, I guess you'd fudge it a little bit and just call Jefferson a wing. He was a three, basically. But I think, overall, that's pretty good. It's always Justin does this, and he does this on his radio, so sometimes he'll ask, like, off the top of your head questions about who are the best five, and then you got to think about it for a second. I mean, there's been so many great Arizona players and great teams and players even from the state, even though Arizona gets knocked as far as not producing that much talent. There's been especially the last 10, 15 years, a heck of a lot of talent out of it, and they got one coming in next year, and Cameron Holmes too from Goodyear Millennium.
Yeah, basketball, obviously there's fewer players than football. But they've done a good job in recent years of getting some of the best talent out of Phoenix. Football, I feel like they just place more of an emphasis on. We have to, start at home, put a fence around our state, first and foremost before anything else. And pretty much every football coach says that, whether they're in California or Texas or in our case, Arizona. Whereas basketball, it's more national, even international, of course, with the way that Tommy Lloyd goes about attacking recruiting. So Bruce, you got a little bit of a respite here, sort of. Not that many games in this stretch. After ASU, they have a week off, basically.
Yeah, well, right. Well, this is where that shrinking from 20 to 18 games, this is where it makes a difference. They get that week, and they probably need it. They're not injured, but this time of year, all guys are banged up and tired. So, and that we were talking earlier about is this going to wear them out? But this is the kind of thing that I think they needed, and I think this is why a lot of coaches wanted to go to 18. They wanted to have at least 1 week. Maybe 2 where they're just playing 1 game and have a little bit of a break. So that does, that'll be interesting to see how they handle it. And, it's that balance always. You want to be fresh and get some rest, but you also don't want to lose your momentum. If you're 21-0, maybe you want to play every day, it's that kind of thing. So, but they tend to manage these things well.
Well, I hope that you're able to take a day or 2 off while the team is off for a full week. I know there's, we always feel like we need to pump out as much content as possible. And hey, man, everything that you put out regarding Arizona men's basketball right now is gold. They are hot. They are popular. People want to read about it. We of course appreciate everyone who's listening to our podcast and consuming our content in whatever form. You can find Bruce's work as always on Tucson.com. We also have a sports only app called the Wildcaster. If you are a subscriber to the Arizona Daily Star, I highly, highly recommend that you download the Tucson.com app. I feel like it's a really easy way to consume our work and read our stories. I use it all the time. Bruce, have a good trip up to Phoenix this weekend. To Tempe to watch Arizona and ASU. Is that a noon tip off?
It is. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. That's very nice. I was up there last night for the women's game, and it was a really good game, really competitive, back and forth. Wrote about how it's kind of a good first round between Becky Burke and Molly Miller. But man, 6:30 game. Driving back at 10, getting home at midnight, and then having to still write another story. That's a tough night. That's a tough turnaround. I would much rather have had a noon start for that one.
Yeah, these day games on Saturday have been lifesavers for me. I mean, it's funny how even UCF and I think even the some of these games I always like trying to do the flight tracker and see when their charter flight. And a lot of times they get home before I've even left the arena, and TCU and some of these other places this season too. So, but because we are writing all these things. But if the game starts at noon, it's no big deal. You still get out time for a late dinner or whatever. It's not the end of the world. In fact, I got out. I forget what game it was, but I got out of time at TCU in time to see some NFL playoff games. I think it was the Packers or whatever. But so it's not all bad.
Yeah, it's always nice when you can get out of the arena before all the restaurants have closed. Like, what'd you say? Like, there was maybe one place that was open in Provo.
Del Taco, 24-hour Del Taco in Orem, Utah. That was it, man. It was, yeah. I think In-N-Out Burger was open till 1, but I didn't get out of the arena till about 1:45. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Mike Luke would have enjoyed the little 2 a.m. Del Taco, I'm sure. Well, hey, thank you, Bruce, for joining us on the pod. We're going to try to have Bruce on like every other week or so, if we can, the rest of the basketball season, talk about everything that's going on with the Wildcats. We thank everybody for tuning in. I'm going to try to line up some guests over the next few weeks. Hopefully we'll be able to talk a little Arizona softball, maybe some Arizona baseball. We'll, of course, get Justin back on here to talk football as well. Thanks to everybody for listening, and we will see you next time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.